scientists come together, assess the science, and they produce their reports. The reports are very, very authoritative. Once the IPCC produces a report, it is something that is accepted by all countries and adopted, and decisions are taken accordingly. And then at the political level, we have the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, where all countries have now signed. The United States left the Paris Agreement for a while, is now back in under President Biden. And the UNFCCC is the body where decisions are made, political decisions are made by all the countries. And they meet once a year at the Conference of Parties, which is usually in November or December. It varies from continent to continent. This year, it's the turn of Western Europe, and the United Kingdom is the host, particularly Scotland and in Glasgow, as you all know. It was supposed to have been last November, but it's been postponed by a year to November this year. Hopefully, it will take place. They are certainly planning to have it take place as a normal COP with everybody there. And we now need to prepare for that. At the same time, climate change in reality is also happening. And that really is where the emergency is. As you know, all over the world, people are being affected by the impacts of climate change. And this year, 2020, or last year, 2020, will be remembered not just for COVID-19, which is obviously one of the most important shocks that occurred, but also for the fact that we have entered into a climate change world. Global temperature has risen by well over 1 degree, hasn't reached 1.5 degrees yet. It's about 1.1, 1.2. We want to keep it to 1.5 if we can, but the impact of 1.1, 1.2 degrees is already being felt. And it's being felt by enhancing the intensity of climatic events, like the cyclone that we had, Amphan cyclone that we had in May last year, became a super cyclone when it was in the Bay of Bengal, because the Bay of Bengal temperature was higher than normal, 2 degrees higher than normal. And the higher temperature of the sea means a cyclone becomes more intense. It doesn't cause the cyclone. Cyclone is caused naturally, but the intensity increases because of human-induced climate change. And this is true for many other things: wildfires in California, hurricanes in the Caribbean that hit Mexico and Central America and the Gulf of Louisiana, and the state of Louisiana in the Gulf. Um, Australia wildfires, all over the world. We are seeing these phenomena, climatic impacts, getting worse because of climate change. And then there is a new phenomena as well, which is sea level rise. Sea level rise did not happen before. Sea level rise is because of thermal expansion of the sea and glacier ice melt, particularly from Antarctic and Greenland. And the sea is now gradually rising. And for low-lying coastal countries like island states in the Pacific and Maldives in the Indian Ocean, and for low-lying coastal countries like ours, being a delta country, the low-lying coastal area is becoming gradually salinized. And we are seeing that in Bangladesh right now. If you were to go to Khulna and drink the water that the people there are drinking, নুনা পানি একেবারে মুখে লাগে, আমাদের সহ্য হয় না এটা, কিন্তু সহ্য করতে হচ্ছে, there's no উপায় নেই. So there's a lot of efforts being made to give fresh drinking water for people in the coastal area. And eventually, unfortunately, if we don't stop the impacts of climate change happening, then many people may finally have to be displaced, because adaptation, there's a limit to how much we can adapt. We have to adapt. We are trying to adapt. We are, in fact, I would say, the world champions in adaptation, but there's a limit to how much we can. We can't adapt to everything. We can adapt to maybe 1.5 degrees, possibly 2 degrees, but higher than 2 degrees, 2.5, 3 degrees, then adaptation amra ki, mane even the UK can't adapt, America can't adapt. So there is a limit to how much the whole world can adapt to the impacts of climate change. So while we focus on adaptation immediately for us, that's the most important part of the problem that we have to address. At the same time, we have to also advocate for emission reduction so that the global temperature does not rise, because we will be the worst sufferer. Others will also suffer, but we will be the worst sufferers. And therefore, we have to continue pushing for the 1.5 degree global temperature rise. So now let me move a little bit to how do we do all these things at the global level in particular, and then I'll come to the Bangladesh side. Globally, there are two different arenas, and High Commissioner has quite rightly identified them. There is the COP UNFCCC negotiating arena, Every year we go to the COP. That's our treaty. That's a treaty that we have agreed. We negotiate in that treaty. In the negotiations, the Bangladesh government has always been very active, I would say very proactive. And the way the Bangladesh government has participated in the negotiations is that the Ministry of Environment has taken the lead. Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other ministry people are also there. Bangladesh usually sends a big delegation covering many different government ministries, and then a lot of non-government people also go. I attend COPs as an observer. I've been to every single COP, all 25 COPs. Not many people have been able to do that, but I go as an observer. I don't go as a negotiator or delegate. But what I do in the negotiations is I advise the least developed countries group. So Bangladesh in the negotiations, we belong to the LDC group. At one time we chaired it, but we are no longer the chair. The current chair is Bhutan. So, but Bangladesh is a very prominent player in the LDC negotiations, and we have some very strong Bangladeshi negotiators who have been in the process for a long time. I will name two of them or three of them in particular. Two of them are with the Department of Environment, Mr. Shaukat Ali, Mirza Shaukat Ali, he's an adaptation expert, and Mr. Ziaul Haq, he's a mitigation expert. They have a long, both directors in the Department of Environment. In the ministry, because ministry people come and go, the people gain experience and then they leave, and then we have new people. Right now we have relatively new people who have not got a lot of experience. But Dr. Nurul Kader, who has recently retired as additional secretary, he has a lot of experience. So he's still active and available. He's a very knowledgeable person. He was particularly active on the issue of loss and damage in the negotiations. He was on the executive committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage. So we have some very knowledgeable individuals within the government establishment who have a long history. The other good thing that government of Bangladesh did, and I would give credit to the former environment minister, Mr. Mahmoud Hassan, who was environment minister for many years and attended a lot of COPs and very knowledgeable himself, I must say. He was one of the best, most knowledgeable political leaders in the COP. He did his own, PhD on environment, so he knew the subject very well. And under his leadership, what he did was he set up an expert group under the leadership of Dr. Kazi Khalikuzaman Ahmad, QK Ahmad, QK Bhai, Amra Jaki Boli, Khalik Bhai. So Khalik Bhai's leadership, people like Professor Ainun Nishat from Buet and BRAC University, Dr. Atik Rahman from BCAS, others have all been incorporated as expert advisors to the government delegation. And although they don't go, my colleague, Professor Mizan Khan, who's the deputy director of my center, is also one of them. He's been negotiating on climate finance for many years. So we have a group of expert individuals. High Commissioner will remember they attended the conference in London many years ago when at the Royal Geographical Society when that was organized. So this group of experts do have institutional memory. Professor Nishat, Atik, myself, Asaduzzaman, QK Ahmad, আমরা অনেকদিন দীর্ঘদিন ধরে অ্যাটেন্ড করছি, আমাদের একটা ইনস্টিটিউশনাল মেমরি আছে, যার ফলে আমরা we can advise the government of Bangladesh officials, even if they are relatively new. There is an institutional memory to provide them and support them. But inside the negotiations, as I said, the leadership is with the Ministry of Environment, and we belong to the LDC group. That's a negotiating group. Then there is another arena which we are now privy to because our Honorable Prime Minister has become the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, which she was before as well. So this is the second time she's doing that. The Climate Vulnerable Forum is not a negotiating group. It's a political group. And its membership cuts across the negotiating group. So they're LDC members, they're small island state members, they're Africa members, they're Caribbean members. The Climate Vulnerable Forum cuts across all the negotiating groups in the UNFCCC, and it takes issues up at the political level, at the heads of government level. It was created 10 years ago by President Nasheed, who was then the president of the Maldives. He's now head of the Speaker of the National Assembly. In that capacity, he is also now one of the ambassadors of the CVF on ambition. And now our honorable prime minister for the second time has become the chair of this group, which gives her political standing at the global level. And that is something we need to make the most of. This is an opportunity when honorable prime minister of Bangladesh now speaks in any gathering, in any forum. She not only speaks for Bangladesh as a country, but she speaks for the vulnerable countries as a whole on behalf of all of these 50 or so vulnerable countries. It's a hugely powerful position. And the upcoming COP26 is a highly political meeting. Not every COP is highly political, by the way. The last highly political COP was COP 21 in Paris, where we got the Paris Agreement. And then now it's 6 years since the Paris Agreement. The intervening COPs 22, 23, 24, even 25 in Madrid were not that huge COPs. 26 is going to be a huge COP. It's going to be a very big political COP, and we hope it will be a very positive political outcome, which we are going to have to try and get done. And one of the aspects of that hugely political dimension is the fact that the United States has a shift in government. We now have Biden presidency, not Trump presidency. Last 4 years, we had Trump presidency, which pushed us back, made it very difficult to take action, to move forward. We did, but it wasn't easy. Now, with Biden back and with John Kerry as his climate envoy, who negotiated the Paris Agreement, very, very knowledgeable about the issues of climate change. And we are expecting the US to be much, much more proactive than they were before. So, very great opportunity for the vulnerable countries in particular to take COP26 as a very big issue politically and to maneuver ourselves or to advocate for political movement. Now, let me talk a little bit about what it is that we are trying to promote as the narrative. Okay, the
Salim
narrative.
Bhai, if you
Yes, please.
allow me to interrupt,
Sure.
before we go
Go
to
ahead.
Bangladesh, if you could talk a little bit on the Paris Agreement and the different articles, we need to
Sure.
understand it. Sorry,
Sure.
but we need to, if you could
Sure.
educate us on
Sure.
that.
Sure.
And
Happy
from
to do
the,
that.
because you see, like you said, Paris Agreement is a big political, was a big political consensus, and it gave the first sort of very strong framework to refer to. So I know in
Correct.
COP26, we have to keep back on referring back to the Paris
Correct.
Agreement,
Correct.
and they
Correct.
agreed Article 6, 7, or whatever. So if you
Correct.
could just reflect the important articles of the Paris Agreement, that will
I'll
become
do that.
relevant in COP26. Thank you.
I'll do that. I'll do that. So I'm not going to go to all of them. Okay, everything in the Paris Agreement is important, but I'm not going to touch all of them. I'm going to touch four of them. Okay,
Good.
which are, in my view, the most important. The first one is the global temperature goal, which I've already mentioned. We fought. That was actually a CVF achievement under the then presidency of CVS, which was President Aquino of Philippines. At that time, our honorable prime minister didn't go to Paris, but our environment minister Anwar Hussain Monju was there, and we were part of the troika. So you remember, if you recall, the CVF is governed by a troika system. The current chair, the past two chairs, and at that time, Philippines was the chair. The Bangladesh was the chair before that. And so we were part of the troika at that time, and our environment minister was there. And we lobbied very, very hard to get 1.5, and it was not an easy thing. We got 1.5 against very strong pressure from both developed countries and even large developing countries like India and China, who were not in favor of it. But in the end, they agreed because we pushed very, very hard. So 1.5 degree is our signature achievement in the Paris Agreement. That is ours. Vulnerable countries made it happen. John Kerry Camera, we forced him to agree to us, and he agreed in the end. So that is our number one achievement. We got everybody to agree to 1.5, even though many countries were very unhappy to commit to something that big or that important. But we got it. So that is our number one ask. Amra, we want 1.5 to stay. We are not going to give up on 1.5. And as you know, the NDCs, the modality of doing this are the nationally determined contributions. Every country is supposed to produce them every 5 years. The deadline for it was last year, 31st December 2020. We pushed for that. Our prime minister had this midnight survival push to get countries to do their NDCs. Many did, but not everybody did. We need to still keep pushing for the NDCs for the 1.5. That is still our number one ask, even though it becomes more and more difficult as time goes by and we are not reaching it. But nevertheless, we're not going to give up. That is our number one ask. So the biggest issue in Paris is the 1.5 degree long-term temperature goal, which was our push, and that is remains our number one. The second one is a more practical one, which has always been our issue as vulnerable countries. That is adaptation. We are vulnerable. We need to do adaptation. We need support to do adaptation. So in the Paris Agreement, Article 7 is on adaptation. And one of the important elements in Article 7 that we agreed in Paris, which is relevant for COP26, and this was primarily the African countries who pushed for it. We supported them. The LDC supported them, and that is to have a global goal on adaptation. So this is like the mitigation goal. 1.5 degree is a mitigation goal, but adaptation didn't have a similar, one thing that we can say, what is the adaptation goal for the whole world? Because adaptation is more complicated, difficult to say. Adaptation is very location specific. Every country has to do it differently. What is the global goal is very difficult to say. But nevertheless, because the Africans pushed for this, and we all get everybody to agree that there should be a global goal. We didn't agree what is the global goal, but we agreed there should be a global goal. And we said 5 years to decide what it should be. So that is now up for COP26. What is the global goal? What do we want it to be? And that is sort of a technical thing. And my center, my research team do a lot of work on this. And I'd be happy to give a separate talk for more technically minded people on what is a global goal on adaptation. But that is another technical topic for COP26 as well. There's an associated topic to that, which is finance. And so finance, again, was agreed in Paris, 100 billion a year, starting from the year 2020, every year, $100 billion from the rich world to the developing world to tackle climate change. We have been demanding from the very beginning that that money should be split half and half, 50-50, 50 adaptation, 50
50
mitigation.
mitigation.
Exactly. But in fact, that's not the case. First of all, we have not hit 100 billion in 2020, where we don't know how much we have hit, probably in the 70 to 80 billion mark. It's very difficult to know how much because the figures are not collated in one place. They're all over the place. And of the amount that is being available, 80% has gone to mitigation and only 20 to adaptation. So that's another ask. We need to go, whatever money is available, it should be 100 billion a year. It should go 50-50 adaptation, 50% mitigation. That's a very strong ask from our side. And that remains our major ask. And then the final point I will bring out from the Paris Agreement, not that others are not important, but from our point of view, a very important one is Article 8 on loss and damage. Now, let me give you a little bit of history of Article 8 in the Paris Agreement and how it came about. Going into the Paris Agreement, prior to Paris, because Paris was going to be a very big COP with a lot of decisions, they were, instead of the normal 1 or 2 preparatory meetings, there were like 6 or 7 preparatory meetings to prepare the negotiating text for COP21 when we go to COP21 under the French presidency. And in the preparatory negotiating text, every article had a number of options that were given. Usually developed countries gave some text and then developing countries gave some text. So there would be 2 options, option A, option B, one from the rich countries, one from the poor countries. And that became the negotiating text, which went into the Paris COP21. And then for 2 weeks in Paris, they were negotiated and agreed the text. Article 8, we, the vulnerable developing countries, said Article 8 should be on loss and damage. It should be named loss and damage. And we gave some text, about 4 paragraphs of text. The rich countries, the developed countries, said there should be no Article 8. They gave no text. There was the option from the UK was delete this article. They didn't want anything on loss and damage. They were not prepared to even discuss loss and damage. So that was a big issue in Paris. We fought very hard. And again, Bangladesh and LDC group in the negotiations, CVF group at the political level fought very hard. And we got Article 8. So we have Article 8 in the Paris Agreement after a lot of fight on loss and damage. Now, COP26 is where we now need to move that forward. And this is where the Bangladesh presidency of CVF is bringing something new to the table, which previous presidencies had not done. Previous presidencies had left loss and damage to the negotiating bloc. So least developed country, LDC group, are pushing for it. Africa group pushing for it. We worked together at the negotiator level, but at the political level, previous presidencies had not done it. As soon as Bangladesh took over the presidency and the Troika met, so Bangladesh, the current presidency is Bangladesh's president, the Troika is Marshall Islands and Ethiopia, the previous two presidents. So the Troika together, they decide what the CVF will do. And so the Troika under Bangladesh has decided loss and damage is going to now become one of our political issues, not just at the negotiating level, but at the political level. And Honorable Prime Minister has already informed both the Prime Minister of the UK and John Kerry and the United States that this is an issue. At a political level, we will look for some level of agreement, some achievement, some movement. It doesn't have to be negotiated, doesn't have to be agreed by 196 countries. That is a very tough ask. But at a political level, the big countries like the UK and the US must do something. They must recognize it as an issue. They must provide finance if they can, or they must provide technical assistance if they can, whatever. That's up to negotiation. But we will ask for something, and we will not agree that COP26 is a success if we don't get something on loss and damage. So we are making it a make or break issue for the success of COP26. They may succeed on everything else. If they don't give us something on loss and damage, then we have already declared that we will not say that it was a success if we don't get something. And incidentally, on this particular topic, Madrid COP25 was a bad COP for us, because this was on the agenda in Madrid, and it was one of the issues that went into the overtime. You know, Madrid COP25 went to 2.5 days overtime. It was supposed to finish on a Friday. It went all night Friday, all day Saturday, all night Saturday, all half day Sunday, afternoon Sunday. They finished, and they didn't resolve loss and damage. It was not finished. It was not agreed. And so this is unfinished business from COP25 that we will take forward. It's politically sensitive. Rich countries don't like to talk about it, but nevertheless, we should. We are not going to give up on it. So,
Salim Bhai, just before
yes,
you move on, because you've
sure.
already said four articles and I think you've finished your four articles,
These are
but
my 4 articles,
four
correct?
articles, but I would just linger a little bit on loss and damage. So I
Okay.
want to really understand that, there was this under UNFCCC, there was the Warsaw International Mechanism. I want you to just explain a little bit to us. There are
Okay.
areas that have been in the UNFCCC. We see in the Article 8 that there are some sub 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there are some areas of cooperation. Is this cooperation between the developed countries and the developing countries? I want to understand this. For example, there's a list of areas where we can cooperate. Two parties can cooperate, including like slow onset events or emergency preparedness. And then if there's something already on
Sure.
some sort of permanent loss and damage has occurred,
Sure.
irreversible. What kind of risk insurance, etc.? Could you just
Correct.
explain a little bit
Sure.
on that?
Sure.
So, how does
So,
it develop as a country which is CVF claim the loss and damage, or what are the mechanisms currently agreed under the UNFCCC where we can actually cooperate?
okay. Very good question. So I'll have to go into a little bit into the weed here, but
Please, no problem.
technically. So um, essentially, the issue, I'll give a bit of history and then I'll come to you, answer your question. The issue of loss and damage traditionally has always been there. From the very beginning of the UNFCCC, it was an issue that the small island developing states used to raise, because for them, it's an existential issue. They will lose their entire country from sea level rise in particular. And the Solomon Islands in in the UNFCCC itself raised the issue of loss and damage. But because it's a politically sensitive topic, the developed countries never allowed it to be discussed. All right. So every year the small island states would raise it, and every year they would get nowhere, until at one point around COP 18, COP 19, the least developed country group, our group, decided that we will support the small island states. Until then, we used to think this is their business. Amra adaptation dekhi, ora loss and damage bole. We don't need to worry about it. But then we agreed that this is also important for us. We will support the small island states, and then we mobilized to support them. And it was our insistence that got loss and damage included in the original text. This is the Cancun adaptation framework text. where the word loss and damage first appears. And loss and damage, by the way, you must understand, is a euphemism for liability and compensation, which
Right.
are taboo words. Liability, compensation are not allowed to be used. In fact, John Kerry himself inserted a clause in COP21 decision in Paris that said you cannot use the Article 8 for liability and compensation. Okay, so they went to that extent of saying this is taboo words, এগুলো ব্যবহার করতে পারবে না. But you can talk about loss and damage. Okay, so loss and damage is a euphemism. And under, and then later on in COP19 in Warsaw, then we had an agreement, a very path-breaking agreement, where we forced everybody to agree. We forced them. They didn't want to do this, but we forced them to give us the Warsaw International Mechanism on Loss and Damage. That is the first time we have a recognition of loss and damage. A body was set up, the Warsaw International Mechanism. It had an executive committee with 10 members from the developing world, 10 members from the developed world. That's where Dr. Nurul Kader was our member. He was an executive committee member for many years. And under the Warsaw International Mechanism, it's basically a talk shop, okay? But it's a good place, at least you can talk about it. Before
But
that,
no
you were not even
money.
allowed to talk.
But no
Exactly.
money, though, no
But
funding.
no money, no money, but talk. And scientific development. So they did a lot of good work in terms of gathering the science, writing about it, explaining about it. And so the Warsaw International Mechanism has moved forward and done a lot of good things in terms of understanding the issue of loss and damage, as you said, slow onset versus fast, rapid onset, and the role of insurance. Insurance is the one area that the developed countries are willing to talk about, but they don't like talking about beyond insurance. And then in Madrid, the other thing to remember about loss and damage, it's not a standing agenda item. It comes up every few years, not every year. And it came up in Madrid, COP25, which was a review of the Warsaw International Mechanism. And going into COP25, we, the vulnerable developing countries, and I am very much involved in that negotiating group with the least developed countries under the chairmanship of the LDC group. I have a group of negotiators that I assist and support. So we were prepared. We went into Madrid with two demands. We wanted a technical arm for the Warsaw International Mechanism, and we wanted a finance arm for the Warsaw International Mechanism. Okay, and the technical arm, we wanted it to be set up with a lot of support and to be able to support countries to learn about the issue, do things about the issue, look at insurance as a possibility. And the finance arm, we wanted to be something beyond insurance. Okay, now, we fought very hard in Madrid. We got the first one. We got something called the Santiago Network on Loss and Damage. The reason it's
Right.
named after Santiago, will you remember, is that Madrid spent the COP in Spain was actually the Chilean COP. It was supposed to have been held in Chile,
Right.
but we couldn't hold it in Santiago in Chile because of the political situation at that time. So Spain offered to host it for Chile. So the presidency was actually Chile
Chiles.
and Spain together, and so they named the network Loss and Damage Network after the capital of Chile, Santiago Network on Loss and Damage. So that's an agreement. That's done. We have that. And so, if you read one of my articles I wrote a few weeks ago, I've written about that is the part which we can agree on. That's the negotiating part. What is the Santiago network? What should it look like? What can it do? These are all not subject to uh, um, big negative
Controversy.
feelings.
Right.
Yeah, these are not controversial anymore. They are like uh, doable activities. The finance part is the where we didn't win. So as I said, it went to the end of the COP25 and we didn't get anything out of it. It was a non-decision along with Article 6. So two things were not decided. Article 6, which is on mobilizing finance generally, and then finance for loss and damage. So going forward, we have a two-track process. There is an inside track on the negotiation, which is the Santiago network. This should be amenable to agreement. And I've been recently talking to the COP26 presidency on this, and they're reaching out and trying to find a way to have a non-political discussion about loss and damage. Practical, they call it practical
At
discussion about
Glasgow.
what
At
uh,
Glasgow.
before Glasgow.
Before
You can't
Glasgow.
wait till Glasgow for this.
No, no,
Everything has
no.
to be
No way.
all before Glasgow. Anything that waits to
Absolutely.
Glasgow is not going to happen in Glasgow. Okay. Um, And now they're already discussing that. So there are some things happening on that front at sort of technical level, and I'm talking to the COP26 presidency people who are involved in that. The other part, which is the political part, is the finance, and that's what I was referring to earlier, where our prime minister has to push Boris Johnson and President Biden. This is the
She'll
level
do
at
that.
which, yeah, this is the level at which this push has to happen. And what it is can be worked out. But in principle, these leaders have to agree that this is an issue we cannot ignore. We ignored it at our peril. And the specifics of John Kerry is that he has to recognize that what he inserted in COP21 decision is no longer the case. We now have to talk about loss and damage. He cannot ignore it anymore. And I think he's politically astute enough to realize that. So it's a two-track process. There's an inside track, negotiating track, where some things can be done, and then there's an outside track, which is a political track.
Political.
Insurance is a go-between. Insurance is inside track. Insurance is agreed. Developed countries like insurance. Whenever we say finance, they say insurance, uh, which we are not against. But insurance cannot do everything, and particularly for poor people. Poor people can't afford insurance, so it doesn't work everywhere. But that's our argument. So we need more than insurance to finance the most vulnerable people. And in that note, also, you will know that Bangladesh has already done quite a lot of work on loss and damage ourselves. We're now developing a national mechanism on loss and damage as a public-private partnership enterprise, which hopefully will go forward. And that's something that is also attracting a lot of interest from other countries, both CVF countries as an example, and the developed countries as something that is practical, that see, Bangladesh is doing something. Let us see if we can
Yes.
learn from that. So
Um,
Bangladesh can
can,
become an example in that field.
can I interrupt just 1 second? So
Sure.
is loss and damage going to be a hallmark of our CVF presidency
Absolutely.
up
I
to
think so.
COP26, road to the
Uh,
COP26?
yeah,
And this is
I would.
something that we should be pushing for, perhaps very strongly, not only
Correct.
politically, but also there are other means. And I don't want to
Correct.
say it now, but we have to. So
Yeah.
this is going to be the hallmark of our. We're
I,
going to
in my view,
create a
that's my
lot of,
opinion.
yeah, right. In my opinion
Hopefully,
too.
hopefully your senior people in the government will also agree. But so far they do. Honorable Prime Minister understands this, and this is her message. Honorable Finance, both Foreign Minister and Finance Minister understand it, and that has been their message. So we are being strong on this, and Mr. Abul Kalam Azad obviously as well. So we are taking a strong point on this. Let me add one other caveat to COP26. Not everything is going to happen in COP26, all right? So we need to think COP26 and COP27. And so COP27 is going to be an African COP. Now, at the moment, only one country in Africa has offered to host it. That's Egypt. We are not happy with Egypt. All right. Egypt is not a particularly friendly country. We are trying to get another CVF country in Africa, possibly, and I'm giving you this in confidence, Rwanda or Ghana, all right, to offer to host it. If one of the other African countries offers to host, then it is very likely they will get it, because North Africa, the Maghreb, has had several. Marrakesh, there have been two COPs in Marrakesh and Morocco. So the Maghreb countries in Africa have already had COPs several times. The Sub-Saharan Africa has not had that many COPs. South Africa has had a COP, Nairobi has had a COP, but many other countries have not had COPs. So if another Sub-Saharan Africa country offers to host, then it's very likely that they will get it. And we are trying to push diplomatically to get another CVF African country to offer to be the host, and then CVF will support them. And if we can get them to be the host, then our strategy is not just a COP26 strategy, but a COP26 followed by COP27 strategy, where Africa is going to host COP27. All right. And the African COP27, we make that into the vulnerable countries COP. That is where we become in charge. We are the ones who will set the agenda. We are the ones who will plan, but we have to plant the seed in COP26. The fruit may not bear in COP26, but the seed has to be planted in COP26, and we have to think COP27, and our presidency will run into COP27. So our presidency of CVF will cover both COP26 and COP27, hopefully, if they happen not too far apart. And so we need to be thinking
Yes,
26 and 27, all right? Not
27
just
together.
26. Doesn't end in 26, all right?
And you're aware that Rwanda is going to host the Commonwealth Summit. That is why
Precisely.
from Bangladesh presidency, we are hosting this Commonwealth CVF dialogue to
Excellent.
get Rwanda on board, because we need to get
Excellent.
Rwanda on board right now.
Precisely. And do your best to get them
I
on
hope
board, get
you're
them.
working with the Rwandan civil society, your
Yes.
friends in
So
Rwanda. Good.
just to let you know, another avenue where we all need to be working together, and your communications and press people need to be in the loop on that, is working with civil society, because civil society, particularly in the developed world, they are our friends. Civil society want to support the vulnerable countries, and they have done in the past. In Paris, they were big supporters. Without them, we would not have got 1.5. They mobilized the public in their own countries to support us. So we need to be working on civil society, media as well, through the
And
media,
young
uh,
people, the young
and
people's.
youth and young people. Absolutely, young people. They are our friends. They are our allies. So we need to be cultivating them. We need to be working with them, both in the developing countries, CVF countries, our own young people, but also young people in the developed countries as well. And that is another sort of arena in which we have to become adept. We have to be able to operate in that arena very, very effectively, and have the skill set to do that, and have the people to do that. And I'm sure we have. Our ambassadors, the 5 ambassadors that we have from the CVF, they have very good experience in working with different constituencies, and we can mobilize them to deal with these different constituencies going forward. So that's a very big issue. Let me before we end, if you don't mind, I'm going to have to leave in a little while.
Yes,
I
yes, of
I
course.
I,
Um,
I, I let
after
let me.
after Paris Agreement, what did you want to? And you spoke a little bit about COP26. What do you wanted to speak about next?
Well, I want to come to the climate prosperity
Yes,
issue,
thank you very
if
much.
that's
I was
okay.
going to
Yeah,
ask you about that.
yeah.
And I
So,
had one question, so I know
yeah,
you're pressed for time. You see, in the United Kingdom, the entire climate change, activities, nationwide coordination, everything is done by the ministry. There's a department for business, energy, and environment.
I
In
know.
Bangladesh, we have this. We know that mitigation, adaptation, resilience, or it cuts across many ministries, but key ministries would be industry, would be
Mhm.
transportation, would be energy, agriculture in particular, and environment. Now, do we have coordination among these 5? Because how are we, like in the climate prosperity concept, are we engaging all these 5 in the ministries? Just wanted you to reflect on that
Sure.
as well.
So, so the answer is yes, but not as much as we should have. Okay. So it is yes at a fairly superficial level. We need to make that much more substantive rather than superficial. And the actual modality in which it's taking place is the preparation of the current revised nationally determined contribution NDC of Bangladesh. Okay, so you remember the original INDC, which was at the Paris time, the intended NDC, that was the first round. The new one is the full-fledged NDC. We had 4 sectors in the original one. And now we are adding a couple of more sectors. And there is a expert team which is led by CGIS. It is Government of Bangladesh, under the Government of Bangladesh, supported by UNDP. There's an expert group consortium led by CGIS, the Center for GIS, and my center is part of that. Bangladesh Center for Advanced Studies, Atik Rahman is part of that, and C3R, Professor Ainun Nishat is also part of that. The team leader is in fact Atik Rahman, and they are preparing this, and they are talking to all the ministries. The ministries are very much involved in that. At the same time, we are moving towards the prosperity plan. So the prosperity plan takes us much further than the NDC. All right. So if I were to describe what is the difference, I will say the difference between what we have done so far with the National Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan in Bangladesh, the National Adaptation Plan, which we are now also doing, also the same consortium are doing the NAP, the National Adaptation Plan, which Professor Ainun Nishat is the team leader. I am also part of that. And the Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, a revised version, is also coming out very soon under the Ministry of Environment. All of these plans are about how climate change can be fed into or mainstreamed into or incorporated into our national activities, development activities across different sectors. So it is climate as an input. It's a learning exercise. Everybody has to learn what is climate, what does it mean, what do we do, how do we do it. So it is what I would term an incremental planning. It's a big increment because everybody is now understanding climate change and including it. And Bangladesh has, in fact, set up the Climate Change Trust Fund with our own money. Now the climate budget in our national budget. These are all uh, aspects of that incorporating climate change into our development to become more resilient. So we are moving from
You
adaptation
have
to
to give full
resilience.
credit to Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina for that.
Absolutely,
She's the one who
absolutely,
set it up.
absolutely.
To be
She gets
self-independent. Doesn't
she
matter who
gets
gives
it
us money, we are creating our
precisely.
own money. Right.
Absolutely, 100% agree with you on that, and I always say that. But now we are taking it a step further. All right, the climate prosperity is a paradigm shift. It's not about climate anymore. It's about our national development in the context of a climate changed world. It's a different world. It's a post-COVID world. It's about, the post-COVID green agendas. And it's about everything. Every single dollar, every single euro, every single taka that is now going to be planned and invested, whether it's by private sector or a public sector, has to take climate into account, whether they like it or not, both mitigation as well as adaptation. This now has to be part of the overall national development plan. And that's what we are calling a prosperity plan. The prosperity plan is President Nasheed's coinage. And I think it's a very good coinage that we, the CVF countries, will now move forward and shift the paradigm again. We have shifted the paradigm several times. We are going to shift the paradigm again. And we are no longer saying, risk management and adaptation and, help us. We are saying we are going forward and we are going to be the champions of incorporating national development in the context of a changed climate. We are going to do it. We will do loss and damage ourselves as well. And we encourage all the other countries to do the same, and the CVF countries have already agreed that they are going to do that. And we have started work on the climate prosperity plan, the Mujib climate prosperity plan of Bangladesh. Each country will give it its own name that has been agreed, but it will
But
be a climate
Bangladesh, our
prosperity.
Prime Minister was the first one to declare it. That ours is
Absolutely,
the first
absolutely.
one, Mujib Climate
Correct.
first one.
We are the first, and others are in the pipeline, and that is going to be the, I would say, the major substantive, not a negotiating contact, but a substantive output from the presidency of Bangladesh over the next 2 years of the CVF. We will initiate the prosperity plans and encourage other countries to do it and support other countries to help them prepare their prosperity plans. And a very important element of this is that this becomes the bailiwick or the center of gravity is in the Ministry of Finance. This is the V20, the finance minister's baby. The finance ministers have to understand this. They have to embrace this. They have to put it into practice and make it happen. And finance ministers are not negotiators. They don't go to COPs. They don't need to, negotiate. They leave that to foreign ministry and environment ministry. But they have budgets. They have their own budget. They can allocate their own budget. Bangladesh is now allocating 8% of our budget to climate change. So that's basically what we're talking about. Is putting it into the mainstream of our own national development, both public sector and private sector investment plans for the future, for a future prosperity that takes into account climate. We know climate is going to happen, it's going to make things worse, but we are ready to challenge that and to rise above the challenge. And that is really where we bring the word prosperity to the fore. It's about prosperity even in difficult circumstances. We will not let the circumstances defeat us. We will defeat the circumstances. So it's about paradigm shifting the arguments. Now, if you want examples of how we're going to do this, we still are
Hmm.
working on that. We don't
Right.
have very, very specific examples, but in Bangladesh, we can show the Delta plan, the perspective plan. We've been putting in climate finance budget, as I said, 8%. So we are, in practice already doing things that we are talking about, and we'll do even more of them going forward. And that's really the new part. And that's what you need to sell to the Chogam leaders and
Yes.
get
In the
them to
upcoming meeting,
support.
consultations, we want to introduce this concept of climate
Absolutely.
I
Very
mean,
good.
what kind of projects we're doing. So Environment Secretary would be there to do that.
Very
Um,
good.
I had one question for you, which has nothing to do with the climate perspective. Just, my
Sure.
last question is that I thought that, the Philippines did very well. It sort of created the V20 forum during and then, it was
Correct.
2015 to 2015, 2016. So it coincided with the Paris uh,
Correct.
summit. And there, what I noticed is they did this Manila, it's called the Manila Paris Declaration. That means
Correct.
CEF and the COP21 actually had a declaration. Now, we
Correct.
want that to happen in Glasgow. Please
Absolutely.
advise us, how do we
Sure.
do that? Why was it?
Okay.
We want to have a Dhaka, Glasgow, a
Correct.
CV,
Correct.
declaration. How do we do that? Please advise
Sure.
us.
So I was in Manila for that. The Philippines organized a meeting. Shanchita from your ministry, who's now in Geneva, was there, and also the Director General of Department of Environment, and the Philippines. And so I was, as you know, I'm part of the expert advisory group for the CVF, and I've been involved in all of those. Uh, so the Philippines organized that meeting. So they got all the CVF countries to come, and there's a 3-day meeting where they drafted the Manila Paris agreement. The French ambassador, French minister came for that as well. So we need to do something like that,
Where
whether they
did
can
where
physically
did this take place?
in Manila, in
In
Philippines.
Manila, right?
Yeah,
So we need to do these
prior to COP.
consultations in Dhaka then,
Correct, correct. So we
right?
need to have it. So what we need to do, Muna, I've spoken to Mr. Abul Kalam Azad. So the expert advisory group, which I chair, we have already made this advice to the Mr. Abul Kalam Azad. We had a meeting with him a week or two ago, where we said Bangladesh must host an event, okay, prior to COP26, whether it's virtual or in person, doesn't matter. Bangladesh will hold an event. We will invite CVF countries, we will invite non-CVF countries, we'll invite the UK at a very high level to come, but we will be the ones who convene the meeting. We are not going to other people's meetings only to talk about us. We will ask them to come to our meeting. And we need to be thinking of when we can do this, probably in late October. So a week, 2 or 3 weeks before Glasgow. We organize the event, we host the event. We need to do a lot of preparation in order to do that. And that is where we come up with the Dhaka Glasgow declaration that we
Yes,
then
it's my
take to Glasgow.
dream as
Yep,
a High Commissioner. As you're aware
absolutely.
that I have created a CVF Ambassadors and High Commissioners Forum. I've written to
Correct.
all the members of CVF who are based in London and also based in some of the small island countries are based in Geneva only. And you
Very
have
good.
been part of the first dialogue of
I was
CVF
there, yes.
CVF COP26. We plan to do another one. So it's we're going, sort of in order of whatever is coming up first. So now the Commonwealth
Sure,
Summit is coming up. We want a paragraph in the
sure.
Kigali Declaration on CVF. We want a side event, but our next meeting that might happen towards May June is going to be on this. We want
Very
to
good.
discuss the next topic would be loss and damage and what we want to do at the COP26. What is we
Very good.
want
Very good.
a summit level meeting between
Exactly.
COP26 and CVF. We
Correct.
want a
Correct.
declaration
Correct. Absolutely. That's exactly what we want to
and
achieve.
focus
And
on the loss and damage.
exactly that'll be our new thing.
Right.
We're still on 1.5, which is ambition and NDC, so that we don't give up on that, which is a common agenda with the COP26 presidency to raise ambition. But the loss and damage issue is our agenda, which they don't actually are not that much in favor of. But we have to force them. We have to make them agree to do something.
Can I bring
Okay.
up one more issue? You see,
Sure.
UK as individual country plus as COP26 presidency has done very well in declaring that net zero by 2050. And I
Yeah.
know that CVF's one of the goals is CVF has also declared net zero by 2050, isn't it? And
Correct.
how is Bangladesh featuring in that? I mean,
So
be able
yes.
to do
So let me give you. I'll take a few minutes to just explain the history of this. The history actually goes back to COP22, which was the year after Paris. Okay, so the year after Paris in COP22, we were in Marrakesh. So COP22 was in Marrakesh, and it was in November. And the first week of the COP, it was the uh, Obama presidency. All right, and then at the end of the first week, On Thursday night, I remember this vividly. We all went to sleep. And then in the morning, we woke up and Trump had won the election. And everything went to pieces in Marrakesh. Nobody knew what is happening. What does this mean for UNFCCC? The Americans withdrew. They went into a shell. They wouldn't talk to anybody. The press was asking everybody what does it mean? What's going to happen? And then John Kerry arrived in the second week of the COP. And he then got the American delegation together, and he said, the president in the White House is still Biden. As long as is still Obama. As long as Obama is in the White House, we carry on. We will implement the Paris Agreement. What happens after January 20th, when there's a new president in the White House, is up to that new president. But as of now, America is still in the Paris Agreement. And at the same time, we had a CVF high-level meeting with our prime minister, flew to Marrakesh for. She came to Marrakesh for a day to attend the CVF meeting. And in the CVF meeting, then under the presidency of Philippines, I think, or Ethiopia, I don't remember if they'd handed over or not. But at that CVF meeting, the CVF countries were the first countries in the world to declare 100% renewable by 2050.
Right,
Remember
right.
this?
100% renewable.
100% renewable
Yeah.
by 2050. And we did this to just change the narrative, to say that we, the vulnerable countries, are going ahead. So the question was, what's going to happen now? Trump is going to withdraw. The US will withdraw. What will happen? What will China do? What will other countries do? And so we
Doesn't
said,
matter.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Right.
If the US goes out, doesn't matter. We, the vulnerable countries, are going to take the moral high ground. We are going to go to 100% renewable by 2050. And we want everybody else to follow us. We are going to become the leaders. And that's how the start to this net zero, 100% renewable segued into net zero later on. But it was us. And I'll share another anecdote in terms of the internal negotiation that took place, because it wasn't easy to get everybody to agree to this. 100% renewable.
And
Hobby ke hobe na,
Bangladesh
parbo
also
ki parbo na.
signed up to this.
Exactly, but with difficulty. So I'll
Yes.
tell you the inside story. Costa Rica was the one that was pushing hardest. Costa Rica said by 2030, let's go for 100% renewable by 2030, which they are going to do. They're actually going to do it by 2025. So Costa Rica is like the world champion on renewable energy. But other countries said, no, it's too
They have a
difficult for us.
huge coastline.
Uh,
Yes, it's possible by them.
so, but then what allowed us to get to the agreement was the year 2050. It allows enough time for those countries that are fossil fuel dependent to have actually 2, maybe even 3 generations of coal and fossil fuel fired energy production before you transition to renewable energy. So 2050 was a timeline that Bangladesh and everybody else would say, okay, by 2050, it's like an aspirational target. It's not really a planning target, but it is an aspirational target. And it's for publicity purposes, for advocacy purposes. It's not for implementation purposes
Right.
at this point in time. Okay. And it made a big hit. It made a big hit. The last day, it was declared on the last day of the COP 22 in Marrakesh. And that was the news. Out of the COP, the end of the COP was 50 vulnerable countries go 100% renewable.
Even
Okay.
if they're the
Trump
most
doesn't matter what
vulnerable,
Trump.
they're the have-nots. They have declared 100%
Exactly.
net zero. Right.
Exactly. And it
They're
changed the
talking about
narrative. It
mitigation.
changed.
Yep. Yep.
Exactly. It changed the narrative. And we were the ones who did that. Now we have to do it in practice. That's
Right.
a bit more difficult, but not impossible.
All right. I think from my side, I had this insatiable sort of questions and queries. I think I've more or less covered my query.
Good. I'm
I
happy to do this again if you want, Muna. Let me know.
well, I
I
don't know
always
if you know
enjoy talking about these things.
you're live on Facebook, so we'll put it live so everybody can listen to you and benefit.
Very good.
I would like to ask my colleagues if they have any questions.
Sure. প্রশ্ন
Anyone?
থাকলে বলতে পারেন, কোনো
হ্যাঁ,
অসুবিধা
প্রশ্ন
নেই।
থাকলে please তোমরা don't hesitate, including Ashik Bhai. Perhaps you can ask the question is how can you make our CVA presidency and everything more popular? Ashik Bhai,
Yeah.
we are planning to have
the-
articles written by Honorable Prime Minister on 26th of March, where we
Very
want
good.
to sort of showcase our leadership or our 50
Excellent.
years of leadership on climate change, or rather
Excellent.
the last past decade, how we have,
Excellent.
so আশিক ভাই আর কিছু বলবেন?
জি ম্যাডাম, ধন্যবাদ আমাকে সুযোগ দেওয়ার জন্য, এবং স্যারকে খুবই ধন্যবাদ। আসলে মানে অনেকটা এনরিচড হয়েছে আজকে শোনার। অন্য বিষয়ে প্রশ্ন ছিল, কিন্তু আমি স্যারের ভিডিওগুলি শুনলে আমি জানতে পারবো। প্রশ্নের এরিয়াগুলি ছিল যে বাংলাদেশ কিভাবে মিটিগেট করতে পারে, কোন এরিয়াগুলোতে ফোকাস করতে পারে, এগুলো জেনে নিব। কিন্তু ম্যাডাম যেটা বলছেন এটা খুবই ইম্পর্টেন্ট। আমরা যে মিডিয়ার মাধ্যমে যে এখানে কিভাবে ফোকাস করছি বাংলাদেশের ক্লাইমেট,
আমাদের লিডারশিপটাকে কি করে আমরা তুলে ধরতে পারি মিডিয়া মাধ্যমে?
Absolutely,
এটা
absolutely.
কিছু ইনিশিয়েটিভ হার এক্সেলেন্সি নিয়েছেন। এখানকার যে মেইন স্ট্রিম মিডিয়াগুলিতে আমরা আমাদের
Correct.
প্রধানমন্ত্রীর আর্টিকেল
দুটো আর্টিকেল ছাপানো হয়েছে, আপনি জানেন যে
এবং আমরা আরো ছাপানোর চেষ্টা করছি। এটা
আপনাদের দুইটা ছিল, একটা ছিল
একটা
ফাইন্যান্সিয়াল
ওয়াজ
টাইমস,
রাইট, একটা ওয়াজ ফাইন্যান্সিয়াল টাইমস, আর একটা হচ্ছে গার্ডিয়ান।
গার্ডিয়ান। আর নেক্সট 26 তারিখে কোথায়?
26 তারিখে we are in a dialogue with Guardian,
Okay,
also
very
with Telegraph আছে না,
জি টেলিগ্রাফে দিতে পারবো, এবং আমরা
Very
টাইমস
good.
দিতে পারবো, মানে
Times-এ দিতে
দিতে
Very
পারবো।
good.
আসলে এখানকার নিয়মটা হচ্ছে এদের এদের যে প্যানেল অফ রাইটার্স আছে, কিন্তু তার বাইরে তারা শুধু বাইরের লেখা নেয় যারা খুব সেলিব্রিটি। আপনি যদি লেখেন স্যার, আপনার লেখাটা নিবে। এই ধরনের প্রধানমন্ত্রী লিখে প্রধানমন্ত্রীর লেখাটা নিবে। সো এই বিষয়টা আমাদের দেখতে হয় যে
Very good.
একটু লেখা ওরা নেয় না। তো এই জিনিসটা, এবং আপনারও কিছু পরামর্শ থাকলে বলতে পারেন যে আমরা কিভাবে মিডিয়া, তো আপনার এখানে লিংক
আমি অত হাই লেভেল পৌঁছাই না। আমি আমার মিডিয়া সার্কেলস করে থাকি নিয়মিত। আপনারা জানেন আমার একটা ডেইলি স্টার আর্টিকেল
You're
বের হয়
quite
প্রতি
often
সপ্তাহে।
quoted by the New, Wall Street Journal or New York
হ্যাঁ,
Times.
মানে
So you're
ওদের
not a
সবাইকে আমি
celebrity,
চিনি।
but right.
আমাকে ওরা আমাদের
You're
চিনে,
a big
ওদের আর্টিকেল
celebrity
লেখার
to
সময়
all
আমার
this.
কাছ থেকে
No, you are.
কোটেশন নিয়ে নেয়,
Right.
বাট আই ডোন্ট অ্যাকচুয়ালি রাইট ফুল আর্টিকেলস ফর দেম।
So Salim bhai, since nobody else asked any questions, is anybody there to ask any questions? Please do it right away because he'll have to leave.
আসসালামু সালিম ভাই, জুলকারনাইন বলছিলাম।
ওয়ালাইকুম আসসালাম, বলেন।
Our ambassador to Algeria.
ভেরি ইমার্সিভ সেশন, অনেক কিছু জানতে পারলাম, আসলে আপডেট হলো কিছুটা। তো আরো আপনার প্রোগ্রামে আসতে পারলে ভবিষ্যতে আরো জানা যাবে। তো আমার একটা কোয়েশ্চেন ছিল, সেটা হচ্ছে লস এন্ড ড্যামেজেস। সোফার আমি জানি যে ডেভেলপমেন্ট কান্ট্রিজ দে প্রেফার দ্যাট উই ডু ইট একাডেমিক্যালি, উই ডেভেলপ দি কনসেপ্ট এবং থিওরিটিক্যাল যে প্র্যাকটিস এগুলো করি, বাট দে আর ভেরি অপোজিং টু দ্য ফ্যাক্ট দ্যাট যে একটা বলেছেন ফাইন্যান্স, আর একটা হচ্ছে লায়াবিলিটি অ্যাট্রিবিউশন। তো এই ক্ষেত্রে কোনো ডেভেলপমেন্ট আছে কিনা, যে লায়াবিলিটিটা কিভাবে অ্যাট্রিবিউট করা হবে, এটা একটা টেকনিক্যাল জিনিস। আরেকটা হচ্ছে যে লস এন্ড ড্যামেজের সাথে আবার আর্টিকেল 6 এর একটা সম্পর্ক আছে। যেমন হোয়াইল উই প্রেফার লস এন্ড ড্যামেজ, ডেভেলপ কান্ট্রি গুলো আর্টিকেল 6 হুইচ ওপেনস আপ উইন্ডো ফর প্রাইভেট সেক্টর পার্টিসিপেশন।
হ্যাঁ, এটাও একটু এক্সপ্লেইন করতে পারেন। আর্টিকেল 6 টা আমি আরেকটু এক্সপ্লেনেশন চাচ্ছি।
Sure.
Absolutely. Good
So
question.
Article 6 is a modality of finance and bringing private sector finance into supporting climate change activities. It is. I'm not an expert on Article 6, by the way. So there are others that you might want to consult for Article 6. But it's also a controversial area because developing countries are very suspicious of private sector. প্রাইভেট সেক্টরকে আমরা যদি ঢুকতে দেই, তাহলে প্রাইভেট সেক্টরে এসে তারা নিজেদের মতন করবে, নিজেদের প্রফিটের জন্য কাজ করবে, জনগণের জন্য করবে না বা আমাদের জন্য করবে না। এটা নিয়ে আমাদের যথেষ্ট সন্দেহ থাকে। So that's why the Article 6 private sector involvement is an issue. On the loss and damage issue, let me just very quickly explain. Liability is a very important issue, and that's what they're afraid of. You're quite right. But liability is now becoming a viable option. There are cases going on in different countries under national jurisdictions, which are very important cases that will take place. So the legal arena, there is a new arena opening up, which is court cases against polluters. And that is liability. That is where you establish liability is in a court of law. আর কোর্ট অফ লতে যদি এস্টাবলিশ হয়ে যায়,
রিভারের যেটা বাংলাদেশের রিভারের উপর একটা কোর্ট জাজমেন্ট হয়েছে।
Correct.
Does that sort of similar?
It's similar in the case, precisely. It's similar in the sense of a court judgment is a very important practice or a very important paradigm shift where the law is brought into the picture, and the law recognizes something as in our case, it was the river. The river has now been recognized as having rights, right to the river. এটা আগে ছিল না। প্রকৃতিকে আমরা কোনোদিন কোনো একটা লিগ্যাল এন্টিটি হিসেবে ধরতাম না। এক্স্যাক্টলি, এখন তার দেওয়া হয়েছে।
হিউম্যানিটি অ্যাক্টিভিশন আর কি করা হচ্ছে।
এক্স্যাক্টলি। তো এরকমই লস এন্ড ড্যামেজ লায়াবিলিটি কেস বাই কেস, এটা কিন্তু ন্যাশনাল জুরিসডিকশন ছাড়া এই মুহূর্তে করা সম্ভব হবে না। এটাকে আইসিসি তে নেওয়ার যোগ্যতা নাই আমাদের। ভবিষ্যতে হতে পারে, but not right now. Right now, it is at national level. So there are cases in the United States, there are cases in Germany, there are cases in Netherlands. Netherlands, a very big case. We actually won the case যারা করেছিল against the government of Netherlands, যে তোমরা you're not doing enough to protect our citizens. Okay, so এই liability cases গুলো national case lawতে develop হচ্ছে, এবং এটা ভবিষ্যতে this will become a part of what the argument on loss and damage, but not in the UNFCC. The UNFCC is not a court of law. This is a negotiating forum. Then we have to agree. If other side doesn't agree, then we don't have anything. It's a consensus-based negotiating forum. But court of law is not. Court of law is you make an argument and the judge gives a ruling. Once the judge gives a ruling, you have no more say. You
It
can
becomes
appeal
law.
to higher courts,
Yeah.
but it's a legal, legally binding judgments, and that is a new forum that is now being explored. সময় লাগবে এটা করতে, but it's something to keep an eye on.
Salim Bhai, thank you very much. I know that you have given a lot of time to us. We are very grateful to you. This is just the beginning. We would like to have more sessions with you to have more knowledge, technical knowledge, particularly because I think every Bangladesh citizen, rather our civil servants, we should be more conversant on climate change issues. I mean, you can conversant ছিলাম না, but you know, the moment we assume CBA presidency, it all came into life, and you've seen that how active I've been, and I'm really trying to, you know, stay absolutely updated.
You have to
Yes.
be and remain a champion.
So I'm trying to do that. I've already, you know, a UK government cabinet officer সাথে আমরা we are যোগাযোগে আছি. Now, what my last request to you is, if you have any advice for me, you know, to what shall we take to the government, what should be our modus operandi with them, so that, you know, they stay engaged with us. For example, UK ambassador for Asia Pacific for COP26, Ken, is looking forward to the dialogue in the Commonwealth, and he wants to understand the prosperity concepts, and that is why we requested our environment PUS to give some good examples. আপনি কিছুটা বলেছেন আজকে যে ন্যাশনাল প্ল্যান গুলো ভালো করে বলতে, যেটা cuts across national plan. তো এগুলো জানতে চাই, এবং they are very interested and they want Bangladesh. They were mentioning about আমরা কিছু একটা বলেছি যে কোল প্ল্যান্ট, আমাদের কোল বেস যে প্ল্যান গুলো আছে সেগুলো সম্পর্কে 9টা সম্পর্কে কিছু একটা ঘোষণা দিয়েছি আমরা না?
হ্যাঁ, এটা নাকি এনভায়রনমেন্ট, সরি, পাওয়ার এনার্জি মিনিস্ট্রি বলেছে যে মথবল করা হবে প্ল্যানস গুলোকে, which is a good thing.
Yeah, they want us now. They've heard it. Now they want us to give a moratorium. You know how they are. So yes, they want us to be very ambitious on the mitigation side, but we have to press to them. We should be more ambitious on the
exactly.
The, you know,
we have to get quid pro quo. If we give something, we get something. So let me give you, you know, my an offer from my side. Feel free to call me anytime. You have my number. I'm always happy to talk to you at any point in time.
Do that.
If you need me to pull me into these conversations with people like Ken, I'm very happy to join you in the conversation and clarify issues. You know that the UK government, Bangladesh government has been supporting a series of dialogues. I was one of the moderators of these. We've done 7 of them. We have the 8th one coming up on climate finance. It's a UK FCDO supported Simon Maxwell from Overseas Development Institute in London, and I have been moderating them. And we did, these are on the 4 topics of COP26, a series of Bangladesh UK dialogues. If you haven't seen them, I would recommend that you have a look at them.
I would very much like to get involved. Yes, of course. So I look forward.
I'll send you the details. And so the reason I'm telling you about them is that these are also generating ideas for further work. Okay, which about how Bangladesh and the UK can collaborate. Okay,
right.
It's very specific. UK, Bangladesh. We have speakers from both sides in each one.
Whose initiative is this? Is this a FCDO?
Yes, it's an FCDO initiative. They did a tender. They did a call for proposals, and the organization that got it is Mott McDonald's. They're a consulting company, and they organized a set of dialogues, webinar type dialogues, and they then invited myself and Simon Maxwell to be the moderators for the whole series. So he and I moderate each of them, and we've done a whole series of them already. The last one coming up on 3rd March is on finance. The topic is finance.
Such a shame we
So
didn't get involved with this. And,
I'll send you. They're all recordings. You can have a look at them.
okay.
But I would recommend that you do, because each of them has come out with ideas for collaboration between
Bangladesh and
UK and
UK.
Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
Okay? And we have private
We'll listen
sector
to
from
that.
UK, private sector from Bangladesh in the last one, which was on renewable energy. So they're actually tantalizing ideas for actual practical collaboration between the two countries. It's not about negotiations. It's about tackling climate change in particular.
Right.
So
Together.
I'll send you the link, and if you are able to, please join the one on 3rd March. That will
Inshallah,
be the last
I'll
of the
join.
series.
So we'll conclude our session, today's session. Before that, আমি আপনার সঙ্গে কথা বলবো। আমাদের এই বছর তো জানেন বাংলাদেশ এবং যুক্তরাজ্যের আমাদের স্বাধীনতা সুবর্ণ, আমি এখানে বাংলায় বলছি, সুবর্ণ জয়ন্তীর সাথে সাথে কিন্তু আমাদের বাংলাদেশ এবং যুক্তরাজ্যের যে কূটনৈতিক সম্পর্ক, সেটারও 50 বছর। ওইটার একটা থিম হচ্ছে কিন্তু ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ। আমরা এটা আমাদের সাইড থেকে আমি প্রপোজ করতে চাই, এবং সেটা আমি আপনার সঙ্গে আলোচনা করব যখন লন্ডন ক্লাইমেট উইক হবে। আমরা একটা বড় অনুষ্ঠান করতে চাই। এটা আপনার সঙ্গে পরে আলোচনা করব।
Let's do that.
So thank you so much. We are so grateful for your time. We want to thank the colleagues from your organization, and যারা জয়েন করেছেন, এখানে দুজন বোধহয় আছেন, ওনাদের সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ অনেক। আমি দেখেছি যে একজন ছিলেন by the name of
আছে কিনা জানি না, একটা
চলে গেছে। They probably found it very boring, but yeah, they're probably thinking আছে এরা এত ignorant কেন। But thank you very much.
They hear me all the time, so they're not new for them.
No,
So
thank you very much.
Muna, lovely talking to you, and as I said, call on me anytime. I'm always happy to have these conversations with you.
Thank you so much. We learned so much. Thank you for sharing the knowledge.
My pleasure.
And congratulations once more on your national award.
ম্যাডাম, আমি আনোয়ার বলছি, আমি কি একটু কথা বলতে পারি একটা লাইন?
জি প্লিজ।
বলো, অবশ্যই। আমাদের অ্যাসিস্ট্যান্ট হাই কমিশনার ম্যানচেস্টার, বলো আনোয়ার।
থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ ম্যাডাম, এন্ড থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার। জাস্ট টু শেয়ার করার জন্য যে আমি রিসেন্টলি একটা বই পড়ছি, বাংলাদেশ কনফ্রন্টিং ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ, এবং এটা হচ্ছে যে কিপিং হেড আপওয়ার্ডস। তো সেখানে স্যার আপনার নামটা আমরা দেখলাম যে আপনাকে হাইলি প্রেস করেছে রাইটাররা। তো এটা দেখে খুব ভালো লাগলো। জাস্ট এটুকু শেয়ার করার জন্য।
কার লেখা এটা? আই এম নট ফ্যামিলিয়ার।
মনোজ বলে একজন আছেন ইন্ডিয়ান, আর বাকি দুজন হচ্ছেন বিদেশি।
আচ্ছা, একটু পারলে এটা শেয়ার the details of the report, name and title.
অবশ্যই স্যার, আমি শেয়ার করব। এবং আমি খুব দেখে খুব ভালো লাগলো যে বাংলাদেশে যেরকম ক্লাইমেট নিয়ে আপনি কাজ করছেন স্যার, সেটা এখন ইন্টারন্যাশনালি রিকগনাইজড।
Thank you.
Also, the other day I was a speaker at the Chatham House, where Ban Ki-moon came and their adaptation minister came, and Mary Trevelyan. There also Ban Ki-moon was praising Bangladesh.
Absolutely, he does.
And he was saying that aro onek beshi leadership neoya uchit Bangladesh. They are such a natural leader, not only in facing the climate change, but also in leadership, in advocacy of climate change. So,
correct. আমাদের bottom line আমি বলবো মুনা, আমাদের এই CVF লিডারশিপের রেজাল্টটা হবে we make climate change our topic.
Absolutely.
And the narrative is not victimhood. The narrative is we are leaders. Okay, we are the leaders.
Absolutely.
Victimhood আমরা ছেড়ে দিচ্ছি, vulnerability আমরা ছেড়ে দিচ্ছি,
keeping the head high.
Exactly.
Our honorable Prime Minister's values and principles is that মাথা উঁচু করে চলা,
একেবারে
self-respecting ভাবে চলা.
Correct.
That's why she created the climate fund, because she said that we can't work, because you remember after the
precisely.
If you recall, now this is an anecdote I'd like to finish with. What happened in the London summit, Bangladesh UK summit? There was so much hullabaloo about this fund, and then the fund suddenly there was no agreement on who's going to administer the fund and govern the fund. The governance পরে ওয়ার্ল্ড ব্যাংকে করাতে হলো। পরে প্রাইম মিনিস্টার বললেন যে তখন সে সময় যে কোনো দরকার নেই এই সমস্ত কলোনাইজেশনের, we will create our own fund.
আমরা করি correct. She did.
It's like the Padma Setu story.
Exactly. Now ওনার সাহস আছে, উনি বুঝেন এগুলো। So we must use that. We must honor her directions, and
this is so funny. We did so much talking on this fund at the Bangladesh UK Climate Summit, and then it all fizzled out, nowhere.
Exactly.
So thank you very much, Saleem bhai.
Good.
I'll stop there.
Okay, so
We'll say
let's
goodbye
continue
now.
the dialogue.
Inshallah. Next
We'll
one.
stay in touch.
Until
Khuda
next
Hafiz.
time. Khuda Hafiz.
Right.